Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God. So, I sometimes ask myself, why do I like to start every community hour with that? Um, well, you know, the foundation of everything Bruno Groening spoke about is God. That's just Bruno was a God man. He was into God, and he pointed out that his life was a testimony to what's possible if we follow God, and um, and if we recognize who and what we are, if we recognize our dependence on God, our need for God, and our humility before God. But not just our need for God, and not just humility, but also the recognition of the words that come, the beauty that we are. Because it'd be one thing to, be like to say, God is so amazing and so wonderful. And, but I'm this miserable sinner, which sadly has been a very predominant idea for quite some time. Like, yes, God is so amazing, but I'm so awful. So Bruno kind of gave us the full spectrum, that God is unspeakably good. In fact, God is goodness itself. And, well, as it says in the Bible, we're made in the image and likeness of God. That glory and that wonder that we are, that glory and wonder that God is, that lives inside of us. And so sometimes it can be a little confusing. I spoke about this a little bit yesterday, the paradox of, and the way to, or at least the way that Bruno taught us to access that, is a path of humility. But it's not a path of humiliation, which I think has been the mistake. One of the fundamental mistakes of religious and spiritual philosophy for quite some time is this idea that God is all good and we're all bad. Or that we are miserable sinners or something like that. The way Bruno Groening put it was more that, God is goodness and harmony and love itself. And that lives inside of us. He didn't go into a lot of details, but he did say the divine spark, that it cannot be tainted. He made this very simple declaration: the human being is and remains divine, is never evil, is never satanic, and that it can be forced to serve evil. When speaking of the great turnaround or great correction, he said, back to nature, back to God, and back to the belief in the goodness in human beings. He even went so far as to say, I've come to return your natural human instinct. And he even redefined, so what does it mean to be human? Well, obviously there's many definitions and there's many philosophies, some of them spiritual and religious, some of them not, that say things like human nature is evil, or human nature is selfish, or Um, humans are, inherently violent. Da 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 da. There's many. There's many ways of looking at the world out there. Again, some of them spiritual, religious, some of them not, that have really defined. Not just said like, oh, humans humans have selfish tendencies, or humans have this capacity for evil, but there are many ideas out there that straight up say humans are evil, humans are selfish. Um, Humans aren't just flawed; they're um, like inherently bad. And if we really, we really reflect on that, that's a very, if we have taken on the idea, and all of us have heard it, and all of us have been told it in some way, shape, or form, and let's just sit with that for a moment. If we've taken on the idea that we're inherently bad, then we're not. There's so many implications of that, right? One of them being is we're not going to feel worthy of help and healing. We're not going to feel worthy of anything good because we're going to think we're inherently bad. This body is white, or as they say, or Caucasian. That's the race of this body, and so I've never, and I live in the United States, which is primarily a white or Caucasian nation. So I've never dealt with sort of racial discrimination or just racism itself. And when I put myself in the position of you know minorities in this country or other countries who are told, hey, because of your race, you're inherently evil, you're inherently flawed, like you're no good. In essence, you're no good because of who or what you are. That's part of the message of racism. Like, because of your race, you're inherently flawed. And so that's, and we abhor, many people think of racism as one of the deepest evils on the planet. And from the point of view of Bruno's teachings, I would say they're close. And actually, one of the deepest evils is to see all humans that way, to define human being as fundamentally bad or fundamentally flawed. Our dear friend Bruno takes the exact opposite stance, the exact opposites of that. He said, God created humans beautiful, good, and healthy. Because, again, there's many implications of seeing humans as inherently flawed. Not just flawed, but inherently bad, inherently evil. And one of them is, it's an insult, it's a judgment of our Creator, of the Creator. Right? Like, let's say there's an artist who just creates these nasty, like yucky works of art. Like, it's just, art. I don't know how to say it. This is just a metaphor, but it's just like gross and wrong and bad. Well, that's a reflection of its creator. So if we see ourselves as, if we take on some of these ideas, and then we're also taking on that which made us is is that way too. And looking around the planet today, it's not necessarily. I almost want to say it's almost. We could say it's not that it's true, but it's almost. It can seem logical to say, yeah, human beings are evil. I mean, the way we're treating the planet, the way, not necessarily individuals, but as a whole, the way humanity is treating the planet, um, treating each other. Like, certainly, I'm not saying there's no reason. It's not like there's no evidence for that way of thinking. But Bruno Groening, but it's based on. Well, anyway, Bruno Groening gives us another explanation, because you could look around the world and be like, wow, people are destroying the planet. People are treating each other awfully. There's so much corruption. It doesn't stem, it's not like it's the zebras. It's not like it's the cats and dogs that are causing all these problems. It's the human beings. They must be evil. So it can seem logical. The key word is, of course, seem. But Bruno Groening gives another explanation. That as children of God, we have this amazing, amazing capacity to receive. And actually, in different ways, he said that's what's natural, is for us to receive from God. We read yesterday, I'm not sure if I'll be able to find it or not, but he straight up said, you as children of God can receive the life stream from your Father. So we have this amazing, amazing capacity to receive, and not just energy, but thoughts, and we also have this amazing thing called free will, and the capacity to misuse it, and the capacity to receive that which is not good. Bruno speaks a lot about evil thoughts. I don't see him speaking so much about negative energy, but he does say there are two sources of power, or two sources of energy. Primarily what he talks about is receiving negative thoughts, but regardless. So we have this capacity to take in. And fundamentally, he says there's basically two things we can take in: that which is good, and that which is evil or not good. And he even comes up with very, very even really redefines what's good and what's evil, is that which serves life, and that which is harmonious, and that which connects us to God, and evil, that which is harmful, that which disconnects us from God, and I would say that which leads us to act, to think, act, and feel contrary to what we are. Someone who just takes in good, who never takes in evil, isn't going to harm someone else. And they're going to treat this planet well. And someone who doesn't, according to Bruno Groening, that it's not the human being that actually does the evil, that it's evil, and that once we've taken some of it in, we're we're in its claws, in its grasp. Even under such circumstances, even someone who's taken in so much evil, and of course, Bruno Groening showed up in post-World War II Germany, where one of the greatest evils in human history had happened. Bruno Groening shows up and says the human being is and remains divine. I mean, what happened in Germany was so just unspeakably horrific or evil that, people don't even like to talk about it. And every time I mention it in community hour, I cringe a little bit. Like, is it okay to even mention that? Like, that's how bad it was. And let's be clear, that's how badly human beings treated human beings. That it was like a true horror movie. A horror, I don't go to horror movies anymore, but I did when I was younger. And horror movies are like depictions of unspeakable evil. Um, and one happened on a big scale. And yes, it was human beings inflicting horror on other human beings. And then Bruno Groening shows up and points out that, well, actually, that it wasn't the human beings doing it to each other. It was evil acting through human beings. Bruno Groening was so adamant that I and you and everyone else is good, is divine, is godly, is holy, that we can't do any harm. But we can take on evil and it can act through us. But let's really sit with that for a moment. According to Bruno Groening, it's not the human, like, let's say I go yell at someone, or worse yet, let's say I start a fight and I actually, beat someone up. Like, let's just be very extreme for a moment. Extremes can help us see. Well, according to Bruno Groening, what I did was wrong, but actually it wasn't me that did it. I associated with evil, I took in evil, and it acted through me. This does not deny responsibility. This does not deny that I acted wrongly. In this case, the acted wrongly would have been what I did before I yelled at someone and then started a fight. It doesn't deny that I need to feel regret for what I did or that I need to try and make it up. None of that. But it does deny one very important thing, that I don't want to talk about myself that way. A person who behaves that way, what it does deny is that they're bad. Bruno said, from a spiritual point of view, there are no bad people, only people with bad habits. So that's how, Bruno Groening believed in God. He also believed in human beings as a creation of God, as a pure, holy, and holy, Holy, and a holy good, Wholey, I think, a completely good creation of God, like our Father, or as it says in the Bible, in the image and likeness of God. Now this is one of the fundamental pieces of what Bruno taught, and that this whole path, this whole path we're on, as I understand it, is uh, is uncovering or recovering what we actually are. Good, holy, Holy, good, holy, divine, children of God, creations of God. Bruno said that human beings are a Gottlichen Wunder. Wunder means miracle, marvel, that which is something wonderful. Think about that. We're miracles. We are so good. We're so good that we actually can't harm someone else. We can't harm life. Because of free will, because of this receptive capacity, we can take in an energy that can, and as Bruno said, I would love to look up the German word, but it's translated as servant. I'm wondering servant, slave. We can be enslaved and forced to act contrary to our nature. When you think about it, it's very tragic. Very tragic. It's like someone who spends their whole life collecting, beautiful crystal figures. These very delicate, very beautiful works of art of maybe, crystal animals and crystal flowers, and has this whole collection, and they love it. It's like who they are. It's what they do. Gives their life meaning and purpose. And maybe they even start at a certain point, they start buying them, and then they start making them themselves. It's like their whole life devoted to creating these beautiful, delicate works of art. And they care for them and protect them and take care of them. And then one day they take in some evil thoughts or take in some evil energy, and they smash them. They smash them all. So what that person did, completely contrary to who, and of course this is just a metaphor, but completely contrary to who and what they are. And so again, this isn't to deny, because there are some spiritual teachings out there, some distortions, I would say. I don't even want to call them teachings, that deny responsibility, even deny that evil exists. That that's not what I'm talking about. Bruno spoke about evil often. So that's not what's happened. That's not what I'm talking about. But we're so good that we can't. Bruno Groening's, Bruno Groening defined human being as good. And that's how good we are, that we can't do evil. The one thing we can do is not be what we are. And I don't think people consciously set out. I didn't. And, as I've shared often, and I'll continue to share often, I'm by no means perfect. I have my moments of, doing something that's less than skillful, less than kind, less than helpful. But according to Bruno Groening, actually what happens in those moments, or in any moments where anyone or anyone does something harmful, is it's radically different than what we think. In such a moment, a person is actually not being themselves. They're actually not being what they are. Just like the example of this artist who, so in that example, that's a person who not just they do art, they are an artist. They are a lover of these beautiful works of art. They've dedicated their whole life. It's who and what they are. And in the moment where they smashed the art, they were literally not being, not being who and what they are. That had been covered over. That had been obscured. There's an English word that keeps coming to me. That had been occulted, hidden. It's just a fancy way of saying covered, I guess. Covered up. So it's a very, very radical view of very radical view of human beings. So, my understanding, based on what Bruno taught and some things in the Bible, is we're made like our Father, made in the image and likeness. If I make something in the image, like let's say I have a house, but let's say I go make another house in the image and likeness. It's not the same, but it's more similar than different. So that's my understanding. That Bruno is teaching and reminding us that we're more similar than we are different from God. It doesn't, let's see, more similar than different, and more alike than we are different or not alike. And for better or for worse, and there are certainly many moments where I said, well, God, why did you give us free will? I trust God, so I'm going to trust that it's for better. But we do have this ability to not be that, to not be like God. And again, I don't think, Bruno spoke about the fall when he doesn't call it the fall, but when the first human beings listened, he said, to a voice outside the unity. And who knows what those first lies were. And but what I do know is, most of us today don't think, well, today I'm going to not be what I am. Today I'm going to not be divine. I'm going to not be God. I'm going to be not be light. I'm not going to be godly today. Today I'm going to be evil. Like that's not how, I don't think that's how it starts. I don't think that's how it started. It's certainly not how it continues. At a certain point down the path, some people will be like, yes, I want to be evil. Like at a certain point, evil can drag people so low to where they actually start to glorify and not just embrace evil, but glorify it. And I can't even fathom what that's like. Yeah, I can't even fathom how the words that come. I don't know why. It's like I hope none of us ever have to face that. And so we can't change the goodness that we are, but we can cover it up. And again, this covering up, I don't, for the most part, it's not conscious. It's not like people say like, oh, I'm going to go debase myself today, or oh, I'm going to cover up my inherent goodness. So this whole path, Bruno called it a path of sanctification. It's a word we don't use a lot in English. Sanctify, to make holy, to make pure. It's generally, sanctify is generally like reserved for, the only context I've heard it used is something like, a church or a temple, a religious rite to make a temple worthy of being a temple, basically. And so in this context, what I understand is, Bruno said it very clearly. He said healing is a hallowing, and hallow is another word for sanctify. That the path of healing is just removing everything, removing the layers of evil. I don't know if it works in layers or not, but metaphorically, just removing everything that covers this goodness. So I want to back up a moment and say according to Bruno Groening, we're so good in our core. We're so good that we can't do evil. That's how good we are. And this, of course, takes us to thinking about God. Many of us on this path are recovering from old ideas about God, that God punishes, that God, and, a lot of the, I was raised that people who didn't believe the right thing would be tortured forever. Forever. And maybe even worse than tortured forever is that some people's souls would be annihilated for not believing the right thing. Oh my. Talk about evil. Can you imagine a parent that... I don't even need to go there. Okay. But so our goodness then points back to the goodness of our Maker. And forces us. You can look at it two ways. Our goodness forces us to ask, is God possible? Is it possible that God could do evil? No, I don't want to say possible, but it's like given God's nature, the nature of God. Well, because they listen to other human beings, many people for quite some time have been saying yes and have been justifying it based on references to scripture or just based on the words of other humans. But Bruno Groening, the question is, where do we start? What's our bottom line? And many theological systems will say, the bottom line is, well, this book is true, or this particular doctrine is true. Bruno Groening's bottom line to me seems to be that God is good. He didn't just say God is good. I'm just beginning to learn my German, but if I'm understanding it correctly, he said God is goodness, like the quality of goodness itself. That is God. Ordnung, uh, the German word Ordnung, harmony, balance, self-regulating, um, regulation in the sense of, I call it self-regulation, like a system that regulates itself. That God is that. God is goodness, harmony, love, life. I don't know that he directly says God is health, but he also sort of indirectly, he would say things like, he said, order is God and order is health itself. So that's where Bruno Groening starts. Is there's this reality, this, that's my word, reality, but I don't know how else to say it. There's this reality, this thing. I don't know how to, this fundamental goodness, and that is God, and that is what we were made from, and that's not only what we're made from, but that's what we are made like. There's a funny spiritual saying that, I guess I could have done this a lot more shortly, and I could have said, God doesn't make trash. God doesn't make trash. That which is good, harmonious, loving, doesn't make trash. It just makes good things. And so some of the parables of Jesus then can make a little more sense when we hold it in this light. For example, the gem of great price. And I'm totally paraphrasing it here, but someone was out and about walking around, and they found this gem in a field. And so they went and sold all their possessions so they could buy this field and hence have this gem. So what if you're so good that you could not harm anyone or anything? And not only that, what if, because of your goodness, that you're always connected to God and you would be at peace always? Wouldn't that be a gem of great price? Wouldn't that be worthy of giving our everything to have? Because, it's nice to have nice things, but they're just things. But wouldn't it be nice to be always connected to God? To be in this, what Bruno called divine heavenly peace. And to be utterly and completely harmless. To be incapable. And when I talk about harm, we tend to think dramatically, like murder and violence and stealing, but harm is also just, unkind word. Harm is just, being tired, and instead of going to bed, you spend an extra half hour on the computer. Harm is, faced with two foods, you eat the food that's not so good for you for whatever reason. Or you eat a little extra food, or, harm isn't just something big and dramatic. It's just that which harms life. And so when we sit with this idea of it's, I've used the phrase inherent goodness a lot, but I don't even know if that I think inherent divinity. And to be clear, like, that's not just like an adjective, like that's just not a part of what we are. Like, um, we might describe someone as like, oh, they're kind, or they're sweet, or they're empowered, they're authentic. Like those are all aspects maybe of what a person is. But what we're talking about is the fundamental of what we are. Like just the absolute truth about you and me and everyone else. And so if we reflect on that, reflect on then Bruno's I don't know, instruction to say, plead, beg to God for his mercy, pardon, forgiveness, grace, that you may be freed from all evil. In human terms, it would be like, someone who's like mega rich and has, this amazing job helping people and has a family they love, like just, lives in a beautiful house, just like everything we can think of, has great friends, great sense of humor, physically attractive, like they have it all. They have it all. And through some weird sequence of events, they forget this, and they end up living in poverty. They become mean. They have a job that harms people. They fight with their spouse all the time. They have friends that are just not kind. And like, how tragic would that be? So tragic. And in essence, that's the tragedy, that as long as we have any evil in us, that's the tragedy that we're all until we're free, until we're fully free. And I think of the parable of the prodigal son, and who squandered his inheritance. Well, I don't think, that in that parable, I don't think the person was thinking, oh, I'm gonna go squander my inheritance. The person was just thinking, oh, this would be good. This will make me happy. And so my understanding is that we've all squandered our inheritance, and our inheritance is what we are. This beautiful, pure soul that cannot do evil. Cannot. And we've squandered our inheritance. And so we're on this path of but it's not that we've squandered it, it's more like we've buried it, because we still have it. It's still within us. What we are is untouched. Bruno Groening was adamant, very firm, that this goodness that we are, it can't be made impure. Like, it wouldn't be if it wouldn't be what it is. Like, we wouldn't be what we are. I don't know if that's quite the way to say it. The color white ceases to become the color white when you add in black, right? Like, it's no longer white anymore. But that's not what Bruno Groening said at all. He didn't compare the soul to paint that could be altered. This goodness cannot be changed. Again, and so what I'm sharing right now is Bruno Groening's teachings, which I'm convinced are true, and each person has to convince themselves. And I'm not, Bruno Groening, from my point of view, is a master. So, I don't want to. So I'm just putting forth my best understanding of Bruno Groening's teachings, also based on my own experience. And each person has to really dig deep and explore these things for themselves. Bruno Groening didn't liken us to paint that can take on other colors. He likened us to a diamond that can be covered over by muck, can be buried deeply. I'd say that's worth fighting for. Bruno spoke of the path sometimes. He used the German word Kampf, struggle, fight, battle, life or death war. Ulrike pointed out that that's one of the meanings of Kampf. It's not just a challenge, like an all-out life or death war. And I don't know if life or death is appropriate, but just that level of intensity. One spiritual book that I've looked at a lot said, it likened what we are to a song, called it the forgotten song. And it said, if you could but hear a few of the notes of this song, you would weep. You would weep in sadness, in just utter sadness, meaning that who and what we are is so beautiful, so good, that if we could just have a taste of it, if we just have a taste of what we are, it would just move us to tears. I think those would be tears of the beauty of what we are, and tears at the sense of loss. Loss isn't quite the word because it's still there, but I sometimes think of it as a multi-billionaire who's forgotten their bank account number and forgotten which bank they're at. The money's there, it's safe and sound, but they just don't currently have access to it. So a part of me is embarrassed. I've talked nonstop for almost 50 minutes, which I normally don't do. And I'm actually not embarrassed because I'm feeling very inspired and maybe self-conscious would be the word. And what if Bruno Groening is right? What if the Bible is right? What if now these are my words. They're completely grounded and based in what Bruno said, what's written in the Bible. What if we're more like God than different? Well, let's not get inflated and let's not get arrogant, because Bruno called us to the way to recognize this, paradoxically, is humility. But what if in the depths of our being, we're so much more like God than we are different? What if Bruno Groening is right? We're so good that we cannot do harm. when we're connected to that goodness, when we're connected to God. And then that goodness cannot be changed, just covered up. What if the only way we can lose our peace and lose and have and be able to do wrong, be able to do harm, is when we're not actually being ourself? What if that's how good we are? All right, friends, let's drop in and have, hopefully we're dropped in already. I'm feeling dropped in. And let's spend some time in silence, really. Really deciding to give out. And you can come up with your own words, and if you have your own words, please type them in. Let's give our life to recovering our life. Let's be like that smart guy in the parable who's like, you know what, this thing I found, it's so precious, I'm going to give everything I own to find it. Let's work. If anyone can find that level of dedication in this moment, let me know, because I need help. I need help getting that level of devotion. But let's determine that that's what we're going to build. We're going to build that level of devotion. We're going to build that level of dedication. Because this is our life. This is our soul we're talking about here. Let's give our all to it. And if we're not able to give our all, like I don't spend every moment of the day fighting for my soul yet I aspire to that. And if we're not able to just make 100% full commitment to that right here, right now, let's commit to working towards that. Let's get clear what's most important. Dedicate our very life to that. As Bruno Groening himself said, I'll just have to paraphrase it. He said, to free the soul, dear friends, that it is not clasped by Satan's claws. That's what this is all about. All right, let's spend a little time in silence. Building our determination. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. I'll be doing this again in about 2 hours at 12 o'clock my time. We'll be reading quotes of Bruno Groening and tuning in. Namaste, Gita, and namaste, Simran. Thank you so much for joining in. And hi, Fabio. Arrivederci. Is that hello in Italian, I hope? All right, dear ones, I wish you a beautiful day of finding beautiful you. Take care. Much gratitude and much love.